Oh, wait, this is...
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. You're in for a treat. It's a privilege for me to introduce to you Mary Ellen McNish to the second of this semester's World Affairs briefings to speak to us today on the state of gender equality in the world today. Can you think of a topic that could be any more appropriate on this day, International Women's Day? I wish I could say that it was part of a master plan, but in fact, it was a happy accident that Mary Ellen could be with us on this particular day. Well, we may have been short on planning, but we are very long on luck. It is our good fortune to welcome Mary Ellen to speak to us from her new platform as President and CEO of the Hunger Project, a position she assumed only 6 months ago. The goal of this project is empowering women and men to end their own hunger. These 9 words speak volumes to me, not only for the brevity and clarity of the statement, but also for its currency. Those of us who have been involved in the nonprofit world over the decades hear something new in the air, and if not entirely new, we hear it articulated more frequently and more loudly. It's a kind of post-charity term, if you will, which calls for true sustainable transformation and not just a turkey dinner. Both transformation and turkey are necessary, to be sure. However, they are 2 different pieces of the puzzle. The turkey dinner is about short-term satisfaction and answering a need. Building capacity is giving people the skills that they need to change their status in the world long-term. It is our task as fellow humans not only to deliver advice and goods to those in need, but more important, to build their capacity to take care of their own needs. Mary Ellen knows about helping people and is on the cutting edge of doing that with great wisdom and foresight. Prior to her assuming the presidency of the Hunger Project, she served as General Secretary, that's CEO, of the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization many of you know about, founded in 1917 that includes people of various faiths who are committed to social justice, peace, and humanitarian service. It was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1947. As she describes her new organization, the goal is to change people's lives from hopelessness to hopefulness, from poverty to abundance, from marginalization to full participation, and from supplication to transformation. I know she has a transformative message for us this afternoon, so please help me welcome her.
Thank you.
We share.
We share very well. Well, thank you, Sandra, very much for that warm introduction. And it's really a thrill for me to be here this afternoon because I grew up in Scranton. And I'm what people call a back homer. I come back a lot to visit friends and family. And I have my old childhood friends over here at the table. It's really wonderful. And a lovely woman who just came up and recognized me because she used to work with my mom at the Visiting Nurse Association. So I feel very loved and warm this afternoon. So thank you so much, Sandra, for inviting me. As we mark the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day and the global struggle for justice for women, I want to take the opportunity to reflect a little bit on this quest for human rights. And I want to start with you know what? We were going to turn the lights out because it's hard. I have pictures and it's going to be hard to see. Is there, there's a place here to turn them off? Oh. Oh, as if by magic. Very good, okay. Thank you. So over the past 100 years, there has been a great deal of progress for women in the Western world, in the United States, Western Europe, Australia, and so on. There are many areas where you see these achievements. Women's suffrage and political participation, you saw that in the election of recently. Property ownership and inheritance, education, employment, family law, divorce, child custody, prosecution of domestic violence, health care, life expectancy, and political and economic leadership. All of these things over the past 70 years have been growing better and better for women in these countries. But what I'd like to really talk about is where is the front line today in the struggle for women's equality. This is a picture of a woman at the ballot box in an indigenous woman at the ballot box in a South American country. And what we know is that this is where the battle has moved to, the impoverished world of the developing countries. If we consider gender equality, there are three messages that I would like to really hone in on today. First is that the subjugation of women is the greatest cause of hunger and poverty in today's world. Documented by the United Nations, there are many studies and surveys that prove this point. But secondly, that not only are women the most affected by poverty and hunger, but they are also the key agents for change. They are the ones that are going to make things happen, and they're the ones who are going to change the world. And after decades and decades of too little action, there is some new hope. This is a picture of what I would call a typical young woman in a third world situation. This particular one is Africa, but this is the face of hunger in our world, and this woman is a food farmer. She probably is 15 years old. She's probably pregnant and carrying her oldest child on her back. She's never been to school. She's never seen a doctor. And she lives in rural areas growing food for her family with implements and tools that have not changed for thousands of years. So with this, it's no wonder that the food crisis in Africa lags behind the rest of the world. In Africa, women grow 80% of the food, yet they own 1% of the land. The laws are stacked against them. In some areas, in some countries, polygamy is legal, so there's one husband with multiple wives, and the wives do all the work. The men often leave the family to go to a city or to a mine or somewhere where they can get a cash job. And they do send funds back, but oftentimes they have a hard time even making ends meet when they live in the city. So what you have in rural Africa is that it is a society of women. In the rural communities of Latin America, where the indigenous communities have been discriminated against for 500 or so years, women in those societies are doubly segregated against. Men in both Africa and Latin America, as we know here in the U.S., leave their homes to find cash employment to better their family lives. And in some cases, 60% of the rural areas families in rural areas are headed by women. This is going to be tough because what I'm about to show you is that in South Asia, meaning India and Bangladesh, it's even worse than it is in Mexico and Africa. What you have here is a society that values boys over girls, to the point where Girl babies are breastfed 3 months shorter time than boy babies so that the mother can get pregnant again to have a boy. The girl children eat after their fathers and their brothers eat the dinner meal. They don't go to school. They're married at age 12 or 13, promised at age 7 or 8, but actually married at 12 or 13, and they immediately start having babies, and they have 5 and 6 babies, and the cycle, they're malnourished, and they can't get out of the cycle. It's a horrible situation, especially in rural India and Bangladesh. Even though there are laws against it, the laws are not enforced. So there are advocates working at the national level trying to stop it. It's not working. And to add insult to injury, this is a terrible picture, but the girls are held in their place by violence and the threat of violence. When I was in Bangladesh just 4 months ago, I was in the car with our country director, and he got a call on his cell phone. A 16-year-old girl was caught in the middle of an inter-family dispute, and the family that her family was disputing threw acid in her face. If you're a girl walking down the street, a country lane in rural India, rural Bangladesh, and some cities as well, if a boy calls out to you or tries to engage you in a conversation and you rebuff the boy, he can come back and throw acid in your face and walk away scot-free. And this is the kind of fear that drives girls to stay in and not to go out. It's a terrible, terrible situation. In 1975, women's issues finally came onto the horizon of international diplomacy with the Mexico City Women's Conference. And there it was that thousands of women's organizations finally came together to say, stop, we have to stop this craziness. And in the past decade, we have seen hundreds and hundreds of rural women themselves on the move with encouragement and empowerment of thousands of organizations like the Hunger Project, but others as well, fighting for their own voice and demanding action. There are such simple things that could help them in their daily lives and reduce the hours of back-breaking labor that they perform, such as pounding grain into meal, and simple machinery can liberate it. They walk 3 hours a day, more or less, depending on where they live, in the search for firewood and clean water. So add that on to the back-breaking time in the field, and you see, then they go home and they have to make the meal and tend to the children and do everything. And I think, too, with more time, women can learn to read. More than twice as many women as men cannot read, but that is beginning to change. Literacy is more than just a skill, it's a complete transformation for how a woman can attack her daily existence. And as more and more women become empowered, more and more girls will start to go to school. Rural women are also becoming social activists on their own, and they are awakening others to the rights and possibilities that they can have, and they do this just like we did this in the 70s and the 60s. A lot of women called the question and said, enough is enough, and we want change, and we got change. The other thing that's really helping to empower women is the growth of microfinance programs all over the developing world. In the past 25 years especially, giving women more economic clout and giving them also social and political clout when they have economic clout. And the other thing that's really helped a lot is the Millennium Development Goals, which focus the world's attention on trying to have poverty by 2015, and one of the planks in the Millennium Development Goals is girls' education. This is a picture from Bangladesh, where there's now an International Girl Child Day, so that the pressure comes around every year to make sure that young girls are in school. And I'll say that, I don't know who it was that said it first, but it might have been Mahatma Gandhi who said that the best investment a country can make is in children's education, and it's also the best method of birth control. So I thought that was pretty telling for somebody from the 1950s to say that. This next picture is the woman on the left was a local leader of one of the village councils in India from the Hunger Project's program, and you all remember that Barack Obama was in India about 2 months ago, and she met him, and this picture was in every single newspaper in India. We were so proud of this woman. She gave up so much to travel so far to be at this event, and there are something like, I can't remember, but something like 5,000 newspapers in India, English, whatever, there are multiple languages as well. And so this picture made it in every one. We were very proud of her. And it was titled President Meets President, because she was the president of her local village. So we thought that was great. And now attention is being brought by books like Nicholas Crystal's and Cheryl Wu Dunn's book, Half the Sky. Some of us were talking about it this morning. If there is a book to read this year for you, let it be Half the Sky. It is the story, Nicholas Kristof and his wife traveled, and they ran into women who were suffering from all the things you read about, hunger, poverty, trafficking, horrible subjugation, horrible things. And what he found was when the women were empowered, they transformed their own lives and the lives of their families. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story, so I urge you to read it. 15 years after the Mexico City conference was the Beijing Women's Conference, at which Hillary Clinton talked about women's rights as human rights, putting it right in the center of the UN agenda. And right now, as the Secretary of State, she is actually moving the women's agenda into the global health and food security initiatives. So as power accumulates to women, they're using that power for good. Also, the UN had a lot of different women's organizations. They were all weak. None of them were well funded. And just recently, on February 24th, they united all of these splintered women's organizations at the UN into one organization called UN Women, and they picked Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, to head it. So everybody is very excited about that possibility. This is a shot of school children at one of the epicenters of the Hunger Project in, I can't remember what country, but we do seem to be living now at a time when half of the voices that have been silent for centuries are starting to come available to us. And women are starting to speak their mind, organize with each other, talk to their local government officials, and have better lives for not only boys but girls, their families, their communities, and their countries. And the struggle is very, 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 very far from over. But there are increasing signs that the tipping point may be near. What's going to happen, 500 years from now or 1,000 years from now when they look back at this period of time? What are they going to say? What are the historians going to write about this period? Are we going to say that this is the time when humanity finally overturned one of the most entrenched, widespread and deadly forms of injustice, the subjugation of women. As Nicholas Kristof says in his book, in the 19th century, the central moral challenge of the world was slavery. In the 20th century, the paramount moral challenge was totalitarianism. In this century, the central moral challenge, and really the cause of our times, is going to be gender equity. And I am just delighted to have the opportunity to participate in even a small way to helping this terrible situation be overcome through the local, local grassroots empowerment, women as leaders, and giving them the tools they need to transform it itself. So thank you. I'm privileged to be here. I'd love to engage in conversation. And I know a couple people have to leave early, but that's okay. But I'd love to just get your thoughts and ideas and bring them back with me. So thank you very much. Now the lights. Oh, there's the lights. Okay. The light. Oh, wow. All right. Okay.
I'm sure you have some questions and we'll find things up. Yes.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
What about hunger in the United States? And what do you guys do and what do you suggest the rest of us do?
The question is, what about hunger in the United States? Good question. It came up this morning. It's not an either or. There is hunger in the United States. We all know it. But in the scheme of things, when you place the United States next to any other country in the developing world, it's a political issue here. We have the resources to solve the problem here, and it's not a person isn't poor and hungry because they're a bad person. It's because the political deck is stacked against them. And it's not an either or. If you want to work on hunger, you should work where your heart is called to work. Some people are called to work overseas because there are 90 million people in developing world that live on less than $1 a day. That's far different than the kind of hunger we have here, although it's pernicious as well. So we don't work in the United States, but there are organizations that do, and I would urge you to be in touch with them and work with them. Yeah. I think this gentleman here, and then we'll come back.
Yes, I'm Dr. Jerry Reisinger. I'm the government liaison between the Iroquois Haudenosaunee nations and the U.S. government. And I noticed the first photo on your show there was the women's suffrage movement in Rochester. And just to let people know that it was the Seneca women who inspired the U.S. women to unite and become in charge of their own rights, because the first democracy, which still exists today, is the Iroquois democracy, which is matriarchal. And in our teachings, when the world would come to a period when there would be starvation and impoverishment, that the white roots of peace, which is the Iroquois form of government, would be the message to save the world. And it's based on women being the head of the matriarchal
society. Wonderful.
And so it's, prophecy is coming
Right, do.
true.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
I'm really glad to be here.
Thank
to
you.
give the message of the power of women.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, here and then in the back.
In these recent uprisings, Libya, Tunisia, etc. What's the role of women
Can you
there?
speak up there?
What's the role of women that aren't?
What the
When
role?
you look at what those
Right.
uprisings in Libya, Tunisia, etc.
Right,
There seem to be predominantly women,
right.
and I'm wondering if that's the
Right.
case and how does that?
The question is, what's the role of women in these uprisings from Egypt to Libya and environs? Somebody this morning who we met with, a Jesuit priest, who's Father Rick, okay, his name went out of my head for a moment. I don't know where he got this from, but it was very interesting. He said that terrorists don't come from societies where women and men are equal. And I believe that's probably true. Whether or not we can prove that, I don't know. But what I think is happening in Libya, you don't see them on television as much as when they're showing the rallies, but I do know, I've seen several young women interviewed, and they're there on Facebook and Flickr, whatever, all those things, they're there, they're part of it. Unlike any other revolutions in that part of the world. I don't think the women had much to do in Afghanistan or Iraq because it was an invasion by another country, but I think they're there, but I think they're behind the scenes. I don't know for sure, I'm not an expert on that, but I'm sure they're there supporting behind the scenes. In the back? Yeah. A little bit louder.
I was recently to Kenya and was quite impressed. They have there for girls and boys. It's compulsory. What is Kenya in their history that makes it mandatory that their children go to school? And I believe in Tanzania too. And the rest of Africa, we don't have this.
It's also not free. I will say that all of the education, for example, in Haiti, there are no public schools in Haiti. They're all Catholic schools, and they all cost a fee. Kenya, school fees are pretty high, and parents sacrifice to make their kids go to school, and it is a mandatory education. What is it about Kenya's past? I'm not sure. I do know that its colonial heritage was British, and I do know that when the British came to colonize, they came to stay. They didn't just rape the land and take all the exports and send them home. They actually built the infrastructure of the cities, and they brought local people into the bureaucracy. So it may be something in that. I'm not 100% sure. Not all of the colonial powers did that, but the British did. Yes?
And don't you think since independence, the people like Wangari Maathai, head of the Green Belt,
Right.
and followers of her have been so supportive and forced, really,
Right.
pushed for education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Indigenous leaders in those countries absolutely did a great deal for that as well. And then-
I just wanted to add that although that's the law in Kenya, there are lots of people who are not educated.
Right.
Certainly lots of girls,
Yeah.
teenage girls, because most girls at menstruation stop going to school. It's like
Right.
by law, but the law is not
Enforced, yeah.
Which happens in a lot of countries.
Yeah, that's true. Back here.
As women become more educated and particularly gain more power, is there significant retaliation from men and from the wider community?
Well, it's interesting because I was sitting in a little village circle with women, and the question that I asked was, what do the men think about this? And they all just broke out into these big smiles, really. They went, and one of them said back through an interpreter that it's been very difficult and it's been hard, but they're starting to see the benefits. So the men are starting to relax about having the women be in charge because they're seeing the benefits to their family, their income. But it's not easy. It's not easy. It's an entrenched social problem, entrenched deeply generations. Even the mothers of the men act at the benefit of the men. It's an entrenched social, deeply entrenched social problem. Yes?
Do you feel that the explosion
explosion of technology, that is the internet, Facebook, Twitter, which has certainly been a force in the Egyptian revolution,
Right.
will also help empower women around the world.
Well, what we're seeing is it's actually cell phones in Africa particularly. You have, I mean, in one of our epicenters, I think there are 118 of them, and 13 or so of them have become chartered rural banks. Now, these are all run by women, but so they have to have audits and, I mean, very sophisticated business practice, bookkeeping, but they only have electricity 8 hours a day. So it's like, how do you overcome that? So what we're finding is not only is solar power coming into existence in a big way, but cell phones, they can bank by cell phone. There's, I mean, I can't, but there's lots of things you can do by cell phone that is starting to take hold. The internet is critical. It's broken down the walls surrounding a lot of different people. And Facebook and Twitter I'll let go because I'm not as good at using them as I should be. And I will be. I'll be learning. So, yes.
I'm wondering if you could share more details about the Hunger Project. How are you funded? Where are you located? What are some of the most, I mean, you've talked generally about the kinds of technologies and so on that make a difference. I'm wondering what particularly you guys are focused on.
Well, it really does encapsulate engendering people to solve their own problems and their own hunger. We work, they call it 3 pillars. I don't like the word pillar because they don't connect, but I'm trying to work with that. The one pillar is that it's mobilizing the grassroots. It's not about a top-down, it's about a bottom-up. Mobilizing the grassroots, putting women at the center of the leadership paradigm, and working with local governments to get the services that they deserve. Now, in Africa, there is virtually no local infrastructure. Well, we work in 8 countries, in the West and the middle, but not Kenya and not a couple of others. So we're building an infrastructure there. We work for 2 years with 10 communities who are within a half-a-day walk. There's virtually no cars or, a lot of bicycles and things. But so we organize them for 2 years into they're called vision commitment action. What do they want for their families? It's not rocket science, and they all seem to want the same thing. They want clean water. They want food for their kids. They want their kids to go someplace when they're sick. They want them to get an education. They want the same things that you and I want. So then we help them build it. And we're there for 8 years. And they become, and the game is to become self-reliant after 8 years. And by that time they have a bank. So they have little businesses going on and they're, doing it themselves. So that's what we do in Africa. In India, where the infrastructure is, every 3 miles you have a new village council. They have so much infrastructure. It's not working very well, but they have it there. And the Constitution of India was changed in, I can't remember what year, so that 30% of all elected offices in India must be women. The problem with that was the women were just going and doing what their husbands told them to do. They didn't know what they were doing. So in India, the Hunger Project works to train elected women officials, and they have been gathering in coalitions and really bringing some thunder to their issues. Same in Mexico. So, and Bangladesh, same thing. So it's the same 3 pillars, but carried out differently in different places. We're headquartered in New York. We're about, if you take everything, add up every penny all together from every source, we're about $16 million a year. So it's small. It's very small and daunting.
Where does the money come from?
Private individuals. We don't get any government funding. We get some foundation funding. And there are also, we're very lucky because there are Hunger Project chapters in the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, Britain, Germany, who raise money for the Hunger Project as well. So, yes?
Do you partner with other organizations like a Heifer International or something like that? Because I know what they're doing is trying to make sure that people have food.
Right.
To feed their families.
Right, right, yes. Yeah, we do partner on the locally on the ground. For example, in one of our epicenters, I know Heifer, they worked locally with the Heifer program to get the livestock thing going. In some places, in one case, they partnered with Mercy Corps to get a nurse to come in, 3 times a month or something like that. So it's partnering on where it's most important. Yeah. Yes, here and then over here, and then down there. Okay.
Let me come back to our own deficiency. And I note that Christoph said the issue in the 19th century was slavery, but certainly the agitation for women's suffrage was just as strong. Why didn't, if you can help us, why didn't the women's movement, at the time that they were giving the right to race to vote, just add the 2 words race or gender, since it was such a significant agitation movement led by Susan B. Anthony
Right.
and others? Why did it take 50 years to accomplish from that time for women to have the right to vote?
I just would love to know the answer to that myself. I haven't a clue. I mean, because they were agitating. There's just no question. They were agitating. The forces of power and privilege are really, really strong, and it's really, really hard to break through. And it really is. I don't know the answer to that question, but it would be great if it had happened 50 years earlier too. Okay, over here.
I have a question concerning the slide about the woman who was the teller.
Yes.
In services. Do you provide mortgage services or purchase of real estate? And
No.
You don't?
No. This is microcredit. So we follow the Muhammad Yunus model, which has been proven to be, he focuses on cities, and but you go to get a loan with a group of people. I can't go myself and get a loan because I'm too high a risk by myself of paying it back. So if I take 5 of my friends with me and we have a project with a written business plan, so I had to already go through literacy training to be able to write a business plan, then those friends are going to keep me on track for paying back my microcredit loan. And that's how they build it over an 8-year period. The microcredit program becomes more and more sophisticated as the loans don't ever get really big like a mortgage loan. They're in probably the top loan would be $500. But they start fisheries and they start egg producing businesses, and I mean they have, somebody's has a cell phone business. They go, it's amazing what they can do. Yes.
I lived in Africa, North Africa, and the object was to get the girls married as pretty young and
Right.
have as many kids as you could. And it seems to me that's the bottom rung on the ladder. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's a lot worse. Are they trying to incorporate that into
Yes.
the hunger?
Yes, one of the most, when I was in Bangladesh, and it happens in Africa as well, when I was visiting this rural community, they had put up on like butcher paper up on the wall all of their accomplishments. And one of the things that they listed, which they were so proud of, was in their village, no marriage under 18. And they were just thrilled to be able to share that. That was a rule if you lived in that village. So you know, it's coming. It's coming.
It seems that starts,
Yeah.
they're very young and they have lots of kids.
Right.
More hunger, more.
That's right. It's a vicious cycle. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned Mahatma Yunus, and I just heard a snippet of something I
Yeah.
heard recently.
Yeah.
That
Muhammad Yunus is the Nobel Peace Prize winner who created the microfinance industry in Bangladesh, and he's very good and he's very popular. And the current president of Bangladesh thinks he's too popular and thereby wants to take over his network of microcredit companies and put him in jail. We're all working, everybody's working behind the scenes to try to lower the temperature of that whole thing. It's really terrible. And it's a woman president of Bangladesh at the moment, you know. And everybody's there is working on good governance, and, you know, it's a complicated system though, because she's an interim president. So there's a lot, but that's what it's all about. Yeah. How about other? Oh, wait, down here and then over here.
I'm just curious to know about what is your perception of the impact of the caste system in like India and Bangladesh? Is it dissolving? Is
No.
there hope for change?
Well, there's, you know, they've had a name change. We were talking earlier about some churches around here getting a name change, and so what does that mean? But now the lower castes in India are called Dalit, and while the term untouchable is gone, the caste system is really, it's part of their religious heritage, so it is a very tough. Once you're in that lower caste system, it's virtually impossible for you to get out. But you do have, if you can get the training and the confidence built to go and sit at the table and be a player, you can do it, but you have to be pretty extraordinary to have that happen. But that said, in all the rural villages that I visited in India, the women were coming together across lines, and so I do think there's at least the beginnings of a movement. But it's a tough thing to crack. Where's here? Yeah.
What's the life expectancy of women in rural India?
I don't exactly know the number. I should have looked that up before I came, but it's very low. It's probably in the low 60s, I would imagine. Because it all, you know, everything matters in life expectancy, from, you know, your diet to your, you know, everything matters. Not having health care, you know, exercise, you know, dental, everything matters when you have to add in life expectancy, and when you have a system that doesn't have good health care and you're subjugated to boot. If somebody gets sick in the family, the husband goes or the son goes, but the daughter or the wife never go. So it's tough, but there's hope. I mean, there's hope. They're breaking through this. They're banding together and they're breaking through this kind of thing. Yeah.
Is there a place among the countries you work in where you see a bigger difference, or, you know, a more easily transformed culture?
Well, I can say just from reading and knowing and conversation, not necessarily from experience, but one country that has pulled millions and millions of people, not China, but pulled millions of people out of poverty has been Brazil. And it was because of progressive, forward-looking policies by the president, who instilled a program where a cash transfer went to every family if they met certain criteria, including, is every child in school every day? is every child getting health care and immunizations? There were criteria that had to be met, and then the family got the cash, and the mothers got it, and the mothers used it for good. You know, what a revelation. You know, and millions and millions and millions of Brazilians have been pulled out of poverty, especially in the rural areas. There's still a problem around the cities, in the favelas, which is a cultural phenomenon of its own, those slums that are in the mountains in the cities of Brazil, but a remarkable record, remarkable record. China as well has pulled millions of people out of poverty, especially women, but you know, it's a closed society. There's no dissent. It's very difficult to, if you're wronged in that society, it's very difficult to get redress in any way. There's not a independent judiciary system or anything where you can sue anybody. So there's some tough issues there, and it's kind of like the question, can you have peace without justice? Is, you know, you can have, you know, economic good times, but without what is the question? So, you know, you have to weigh different things and figure that out. So I saw, oh yeah.
You call it the Hunger Project, but it sounds to me like you go beyond that and
Yeah.
get involved more
Yeah.
political justice and social justice and things. And that lovely picture of the woman meeting President Obama,
Yeah.
who was the president. Do you work with organizations like Women's Campaign International to get women involved in the political process when they get to that point?
We haven't in the U.S., but in India, where this woman was, the Hunger Project, and you're right, the name is an issue, but the human capital it would take to try to change the name, I don't think is worth it right now, because it would take us so off track. So, but in India, the Women's Elected Leaders Association is, I think there's 100,000 women in it now. It's huge, and it's having some political impact on some of them have been elected to parliament, so it's really having an impact in India. But we're not working in the U.S. with the Women's Campaign Fund. Oh, is that all the questions? No? Yeah.
Well, what would
All
you,
right.
what would you like to see next happen with the women, with the Hunger Project? Or are you considering working in more countries, or I know that obviously that's an extensive financial issue as well as anything else. I just wonder what your plans are for the near long.
Wonderfully enough, the Hunger Project Board of Directors, of which there are only 8, I might add, which is like, I couldn't believe it when I got there, because I came from AFSC that had a board of 50. So I feel like I'm a pig in the barnyard with a board of 8. They are having their first ever Visioning the Future retreat in Stockholm, because some of the board members are from Sweden. And at that 2-day retreat, their job is to try to envision where do we want the Hunger Project to be in 2020. From that, then they're going to turn and ask the staff to put together, a strategic plan with timelines and action plans for how to get that done. I think without, I'm trying to present material to them that will be important enough for their decision making, but not guide them in any one direction. And I think what's going to happen is that I don't think the Hunger Project or 50 Hunger Projects are big enough or can have a big enough impact on the people on the ground who need the services. I think the governments have to get serious about doing this work themselves, and maybe we could help them do it. I mean, that's one option that I see happening. So therefore, there is right now an African government that we're actually talking to about a $10 million effort to scale up in that African country. $10 million isn't going to do it. $10 million is a drip in the bucket for what is needed to make this happen. And our project timeline is 8 years. I mean, we don't go in and dig a well and then leave. We go in and stay there for 8 years, and that's intensive. It's not. We're not giving money. We're not. And I don't think throwing money at the problem is the answer either. People, and I think I've heard many Africans say this, they have to get out of the mindset of receiving charity. It's not that. It is not receiving charity. That is absolutely the wrong way to look at it. It is really about taking control of your own life and what you can do to build your own resources. So, yes?
I'd like to say something about the Sirleaf Market Women Fund.
The what?
Sirleaf Market Women Fund. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf,
Oh, yes.
the president of Liberia, and
Right.
today is going to the markets with the head of the new head of the UN group. And when she was elected, a number of us who knew her said, "What do you want us to do?" She said, "To support the market women." And so we started this market fund, and it's based on what the market women wanted. And so among the things they wanted, besides new markets, that because all the markets had been broken down, but they wanted to learn to read and write. And so we started literacy programs. They wanted to have support like the microcredit support. And they said, we want to be able, when we vote next time, to write our name, not to put an X. And so a lot of that has been the inspiration from those market women with their cell phones who are really leading their own movement now.
Wonderful story. That's great. Absolutely wonderful. And no, I mean, who could be better than her? I mean, she's just fabulous. She's really wonderful. So that's wonderful to hear. Good for you. Yes, back here.
I was wondering, after the 8 years, are these programs still improving and growing, or do you see them collapsing after you leave?
No, they're self-reliant. We call it self-reliant. There's a committee that runs it, and the committee has bylaws, and they rotate members. It's pretty rigorous.
That community you have, does that sort of spread to other communities to start doing it themselves, or not necessarily?
Well, it's funny because we had one of the projects we have now in Ghana is being a foundation that funded a scale up in Ghana. Instead of building one epicenter at a time, we built 38, and it was really a very challenging thing. And the foundation that funded us to do it also funded separately and privately, and not with our cooperation, Yale University to measure the impact. And they did a double study where some were in, some were out, and they've done a baseline and they're going back. But in the meantime, until we have that study done, McKinsey and Company went into Uganda and did a study there. And it's very interesting because one of the things that they said was, in a negative for us, one of the things they said was, try to build off those epicenters to the neighboring, rather than selecting a whole other place. Use that as a base and just move it a little further. So that was one thing. But the other thing they said is, once you have these people trained, and they're egg farmers and they're fish farmers and they're making things to sell, you have to build markets. There's no markets for them to sell do their commerce. So that was another shortcoming that these are all things that are going to go into this retreat, that the board is going to have to see where we come out and how we can make it better. So, great. Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Good questions, huh? Yeah, thank you. We welcome you here
Oh.
today, and we hope you'll be back.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you.